Yuli, thank you very much. It's a treat to be here. Great to be on this panel. What I'm going to share with you is comes from my last book, Thank You for Being Late, An Optimist Guide to Thriving in the Age of Accelerations. The core theme of the book is that to understand the world today as a journalist, I believe you have to think not in the box, not out of the box. You have to think without a box. And for me, that means understanding that the world is not just changing. I believe it's being reshaped, and it's being reshaped because we are in the middle of three nonlinear accelerations all at the same time with the three largest forces on the planet, which I call the market, that's globalization, Mother Nature, that's climate change, biodiversity loss, and population growth in the developing world, and Moore's Law, which is technology. All three are in, if you put them on a graph, they look like giant hockey sticks. And what these accelerations are doing and the interaction between them, which is why you have to think without a box, is they are not just changing your world. They are reshaping your world. And they're reshaping 5 realms in particular: politics, the workplace, ethics, community, and geopolitics. And what I'm going to share with you in 12 minutes is the geopolitics chapter. Now, I think of these accelerations as climate changes. I believe we're in the middle of 3 climate changes at once. We're in the middle of the change of the climate. We're going from what I call later to now. So when I was growing up in Minnesota in the 50s and 60s, later was when I could clean that river, purify that lake, rescue that orangutan. I could do it now or I could do it later. Today, later is officially over. Later will now be too late. So whatever you're going to save, please save it now. That is a climate change. We're going through a change in the climate of globalization. We're going from an interconnected world to an interdependent world. And an interdependent world is a very different world. You get a geoeconomic inversion, where first of all, your friends start to be able to kill you faster than your enemies. If Greek and Italian banks had gone under last night, I would have had to cancel my talk here. Greece and Italy, wait a minute, they're in NATO, they're in the EU. In an interdependent world, they can kill me. And in an interdependent world, your rival falling becomes more dangerous than your rival rising. Had China taken 6 more islands in the South China Sea, I couldn't care less. Had China lost 6% growth last night, I definitely would have canceled. In fact, the whole conference probably would have been canceled. China falling is much more dangerous to us than China rising in an interdependent world. And lastly, we're going through a change in the climate of business because of AI, big data, and technology, and Moore's Law accelerating. Every business today can and therefore must sensorize, capture all its data, analyze that data, optimize off that data, prophesize off that data, customize off that data, socialize off that data, connect with people, customers and suppliers through social networks, and digitize and automatize through that data. All of these together, these 3 accelerations, are making average over for every worker. That's what's stressing everybody out today. Average is officially over. But what people, I think, have lost sight of, and to me this is the entry into the immigration story, it's made average over for every country. So, how do I connect this to the immigration story? My chapter on the subject is called Control versus Chaos. It's taken from the 1960s sitcom in America. It was called Get Smart. Some of you look old enough to me to remember. Starring Don Adams. He was a secret agent, a James Bond spoof. He had a shoe phone. He was Agent 99. And can anyone remember the name of the organization Don Adams worked for? It's called Control. Very good. Some people older than me. And do you remember who their worldwide enemy was? Chaos, spelled K-A-O-S. Well, the authors of that show were ahead of their time, because I believe the true geopolitical divide in the world today is becoming the divide between the world of control and the world of chaos, or what I call the world of order and the world of disorder. So, how did we get here? The historians in this room will tell you that the world was really governed for millennia by empires. Ottoman Empire, Roman Empire, Byzantine Empire, really up until the 19th and 20th century, when after decolonization, World War I and World War II, we started to break up, in the rise of nationalism, which Julie has written about, we started to break up into nation states. And we woke up at the end of World War II and discovered we had 192 nation states in the United Nations. And the 50 years after World War II, before my accelerations kicked in, were a fantastic time to be an average little state. Why? First of all, there are 2 superpowers competing for your affection, throwing money at you, throwing foreign aid at you, educating your kids at Patrice Lumumba University in Moscow or Ohio State in America, giving you wheat aid if you were Egypt. You could be Syria and lose 3 wars to Israel and get your army rebuilt for free all 3 times. Number one. Number two, populations were very moderate. Syria, that country to the north, had 3 million people in 1950. Iran had about 25 million. Egypt had about 20 million. Populations were very moderate. Climate change was very moderate, hadn't really kicked in, and nobody anywhere had a cell phone. Not only to compare what Paris looked like, but even to compare the leader next door or maybe in the valley next door. And lastly, and most importantly, China was not in the World Trade Organization. So every country could be in the textile business. Every country could be in low-wage industries. My argument is in the early 2000s, when all these accelerations kicked in, that world was completely wiped out. Now no superpower wants to touch you, because all you win is a bill. Okay? What the Syrians are doing and what the Russians are doing in Syria is a complete anomaly. And by the way, they're actually not investing anything in the country. It's just a Putin ego trip, but they are not rebuilding the country at all. No superpower wants to touch you because all you win is a bill. So Israel's got a 10-year, $40 billion aid package with America. We spend $45 billion, if you can believe that, every year in Afghanistan. But we give $2 million to Tunisia, the only Arab Spring country to make the transition to constitutional democracy, and we give $1.2 million to Jordan just for old time's sake. But basically, no more superpower to rescue you. Second, climate change is now hammering these countries. Some of you may know the biggest lake in the Middle East is called Lake Urmia. It's in northwestern Iran. It's basically just a sand desert now. It's been completely desertified because of drought, over-farming, and damming. It's pretty much disappeared. I did a documentary last year for National Geographic following climate refugees from Senegal through Niger up to the Libyan border. Then we skipped over to Europe and met them on the other side. What do you see when you do this documentary? We started in villages in northern Senegal where there are no men, basically, in these villages between the ages of 18 and 65. Climate change has completely hammered the soils there. The land cannot contain them. The population has exploded, so all the men have left. They've gone first to Dakar, and then they hit the road, and I'll explain in a second where they go. So Senegal today is actually at 2 degrees rise average temperature since the Industrial Revolution. 2 degrees rise average temperature. Where have I heard that number? Oh, that's the number that the Paris Climate Agreement was designed to prevent by 2100, 2 degrees rise average temperature. Senegal is already there, and they're going to 4 degrees. So what happens is these men basically all hit the road. They first tried Dakar, and then they all end up in Agadez. They get on their cell phones, where they're now human trafficking apps, and they all end up in Agadez in central Niger. It was a World Heritage Site, a spectacular town where the entire tourist industry has been repurposed to human trafficking. So our documentary begins there. There's a caravan of about 220 Toyota Jeeps and small buses. Each one is filled with about 20 to 25 men. They're all standing. They gather in downtown Agadez in the evening in safe houses during the week, and every Monday at dusk, the caravan forms. We filmed it with a drone, and they hit the road. They bribe the border police in Niger, and they all get dumped off in Libya. I also did a documentary for National Geographic on Syria, the Syrian civil war. Again, this is why you need to think without a box. The Syrian civil war was triggered because between 2006 and 2010, Syria suffered the worst drought in its modern history. It wiped out 1 million Syrian farmers and herders. They all left their homes. They flocked to the cities, lived on the margins of these cities. Assad did nothing for them. In 2011, the Arab Spring hit. They all got on their cell phones. Technology and globalization kicked in, and they blew the lid off the place. The Syrian revolution, interestingly enough, started in the 2 driest spots in the country, Dara and Qamishli. So climate change now hitting all of these places. In the meantime, populations have exploded. Syria's population today is now 20 million. Iran's gone from 40 million to 90 million. Africa is going to double between now and 2050 from 1.2 million to 2.4 billion, 1.2 billion to 2.4 billion. And Nigeria, by 2050, will have more people than America, 411 million people. So that's accelerating. Everyone has a cell phone now. They can see what Phoenix looks like from Central America, and they can see what Paris looks like. And oh, up in the corner there, there's a human trafficking app they can now just click on and get connected to a human trafficker who from Senegal for 400 euros will guarantee to dump you at the Libyan border. And lastly, China's in the World Trade Organization. So nobody can be in the textile business. I was just in Jordan all week, just talking to Jordanian industrialists. They will tell you their complete textile industry got wiped out by Asians, basically, during the early 21st century. So what's happened, basically, is all these stresses are now stressing out weak countries, and they're blowing up the weakest countries. Some we, America, blew up. Others are blowing up just fine on their own. And they're weakening the even weaker countries, and what they're doing is now hemorrhaging people. People are just basically hitting the road. In the hemisphere I live in, between 2014 and 2018, America received 187,000 unaccompanied minors from just 3 countries, El Salvador, Nicaragua, and Honduras. In this hemisphere, basically about 9,000 people a month move up through Niger, through Agadez toward Europe. And you know the Syria story as well, which is why the single most relevant geopolitical phenomena in the world today, and I think going forward is only going to get worse because these accelerations are only going to put more and more stress on average states, is people trying to get out of the world of disorder into the world of order, out of the world of chaos into the world of control, fundamentally changing the politics of the world of order, producing nationalist, populist backlashes. Just one note of what the kind of new thinking this is going to require, and we can get into this in the question time. So Israel's kind of had a policy. My view of Israel is always what the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is to the wider war of civilization, what off-Broadway is to Broadway. So I always look at what's going on here very closely. So Israel's experience of this, Israel got 65,000 Darfuris and South Sudanese and whatnot. But Israel's relationship to the states around them has been, you know what, you guys, as long as you've got a good, strong dictator there, we're just going to be fine. A nice Sisi will do fine, a nice Assad will do fine. And I think what Israel is the biggest new change in Israel's strategic thinking is that it is actually going to have to think about the internal health, competence, governance, and future of the states around them. I saw this in Italy. I'll just end here. There are 3 institutions in Libya today. There's an oil company, there's a central bank that takes the money from the oil company and distributes it to different parties and tribes in Libya, and Libya has a Coast Guard. It has no other governing institution, but it has a Coast Guard. And that is because the Coast Guard was set up by Italy. They set up the Libyan Coast Guard basically to protect Italy from the migrants coming out of Libya. But lately, what's been very interesting in the last couple of years, the Italians have gotten deeply involved in local government inside Italy to try to produce order there in a land of disorder, because it's the only way they thought they can protect themselves from being overrun by immigrants. Thank you very much.